This video is sponsored by Knuckles OX, Baba Snake, Julio the Boy, Blazing Darkness G, and Danny Mash X. If you'd like to directly support my content, as well as catch it early, have your name credited as a sponsor, or maybe even have your What If Ideas produce its commissions, consider visiting the links to my Patreon and such in the description below. Our story resumes in the medbay of a commandeered Frieza Force spaceship, just after Goku has a minor scare at the sight of a stray needle in the room, and Turles spends a bit of time explaining how the Mondo Cool medical machines worked as he prepped them, before immediately kicking his feet up near the tank his brother is stowed into to take a tactical nap, while setting an alarm of his own for around half an hour to regain some stamina after all the constant fights since arriving on the planet. At the same time, Gas stands by the airlock, focusing on doing the same. Though even so, his eyes are darting towards the others in the room, the medical tanks, and then back to the horizon. He continues to look to Bardock and Turles, and now even Granola and his adopted Saiyan siblings, with a complicated gaze of respect and lingering rivalry, before departing the ship to seek counsel with his own family. Seeing his master so relaxed, Prince Vegeta protests that he will watch Kakarot and the others, while his mentor rests, not trusting Raditz not to pull some cowardly scheme like the one that led him to run away to Earth. However, seeing the young Saiyan Royal get an exhaustion headache and nearly trip over his own newly equipped cape just after everyone had seen fit to don new and more durable clothing for the battles ahead, Turles would order his charge to rest as well, since their built-up tolerance to the regular tree of might fruit did after all mean the healing properties of its seeds were less effective on the two of them, before then asserting menacingly that he was sure by this point it was clear his nephews were too good-natured to pull such a stunt. And besides, they should all clearly see their best chance to survive this is to make Turles immortal, and with his mighty power that exceeds any ordinary lower mid-class warrior, and even that of the super elite, he will show Frieza, Cooler, and Cold that they aren't dealing with the average Saiyan anymore. Playing along with this interpretation of things, and hoping that his so eagerly putting back on his old battle jacket garb would somewhat soothe Vegeta's grudge, and show fealty to his uncle's ambitions for a new Saiyan empire, Raditz plays up his admittedly very real fear of their collective impending doom, therefore making it a lot easier to swallow his pride for the sake of another ruse. After all, he, like Granola, still hadn't gotten over the evil Saiyan duo seen through their earlier ploy, and with few options left, he was feeling ballsy enough to go for another roll of the dice, since the alternative was fairly certain death without even completing their mission. Already testing out the range and motion of his new battle uniform with some shadow sparring against an envisioned opponent, Goku finds himself admittedly more endeared to his Saiyan armor now than he was with his initial uniform as a baby, though he does become quite upset when he realizes the holster for his power pole can't be equipped as well, as it slings too awkwardly over the pauldrons of his gear, despite his unrestricted movements, making actually drawing and stowing the tool in battle too cumbersome and inefficient. Despite this though, it does give the boy a bit of comfort to leave the sacred bow staff next to his father's medical machine, since in that way, it's like Goku can watch over them, while Bardock and Muesli are recovering, propping it up right where Turles is resting, and asking somewhat politely for his uncle to just to watch it, until his dad gets done and can take care of it for him. Meanwhile, Granola sits in the corner next to Muesli's healing pod, having refused the use of Frieza Force armor on principle, or what it would symbolize for his people, and with foresight of such an event, he thought ahead to capsule a slightly enlarged copy of his Cerulean garb, which would now fit and serve him better as his own armor, just as requested of Manaito before their mission off planet. Thus, wrapping his scarf around to present himself as a proper Cerulean warrior, he nearly promises to do his best to his mother submerged in medicine, but guessing at Raditz's current ploy, he decides to appear more somber and stoic than he really is, waiting for the perfect opportunity to begin easing out of the room inconspicuously, with a declaration that he is going to try and sneak back to Guru's for the password, just before Raditz does the same upon seeing Turles and Vegeta finally beginning to doze off. And lastly, when Goku goes to use the bathroom, though he is snatched by his brothers to bring his tail on while they had the opening. Once clear of the med bay, the trio begins sneaking around and posting up near the landing ramp of the ship, where the heaters were stationed to guard the Dragon Balls. However, now they seem to have stepped a ways away and lost all focus on the orbs, with Oil and Maki flushingly explaining something to the youngest heater that seemed not to be satisfying gas. For a moment, the boys had to wonder if their once shaky and hot-headed ally is doing so on purpose or to aid them, or maybe not, since their last orders from Alec were to hold off when actually making the wishes until they had gotten some distance to the lords of the Empire, or somehow defeated them. And as the current opportunity truly is too perfect to pass up, they decide to finally ditch that old plan and carry out their own. So with the practiced grace, stealth, and near imperceptible speed the trio had cultivated in order to train with Bardock on their morning walks, or to sneak snacks out of Guinea's kitchen, the boys are able to quietly and inconspicuously snag all 7 Namekian Dragon Balls, and then beat a hasty retreat a ways away from their commandeered base camp, in order to steal the wishes they set off from the Earth to make, with neither the heaters nor the sleeping Saiyans being any the wiser, until it was far too late to do anything about it. However, upon finding a suitable place to both lie low and summon a massive dragon, the boys will come upon the startling realization that those unfamiliar with making wishes to dragons thus far have also run into. The Namekian Dragon Balls actually do have a password they are completely ignorant of, since it requires fluency in the Namekian language to understand, and which the grown elder for some reason either forgot to or decided not to give them. However, in aid of this mistake, an unexpected savior would arrive for them in the form of none other than Nail, having more urgently and better tracked them down than the untrained Dende would have been capable of doing in the canon timeline, as he reveals that the Grand Grand Elder never actually thought they would really be able to gather all the Dragon Balls, but now they must hurry, as while the rebels were resting, a far more terrifying presence was making way for the Grand Elder's home. Flashing back not long before Kid Nail's arrival, we see Guru and Slug come to the same realization just after the supposedly super evil Namekian had pointed this out to his counterpart, who petulantly protests that Slug didn't say they should have given them the password. He just said he should help those children by touching them, grunting that this isn't the point, since he's already been outside hitting his head against the wall for 20 minutes, and suggests that they don't have any more time to waste. But Slug is interrupted by Guru again, because in the end, this has nothing to do with what they were talking about, before Guru changed the subject to comparing Nail to Batman. That subject, of course, being the ungodly power belonging to the Wicked Bloodline, which was currently heading their way. Upon being reminded of which, the Grand Elder resolves to unlock the hidden potential of Nail, and send him after the Earth-raised fighters to act as their interpreter to the Eternal Dragon, adding in cheekily that with his life force not being as depleted as it would be, say if these events were happening 14 or so years later on, he was able to throw in a little bit extra to this, that should serve the young warrior Namek exceedingly well in the trials to come. Though when Nail questions why the Grand Elder would not give this boon to Slug instead, the Super Namekian replies that he already received it long ago, when the Grand Elder sent him out on a quest to conquer the stars in the name of securing television for the planet Namek. Thus, enjoying the excuse to get away from the inane commentary of Slug and Guru, Nail sets off on his quest, narrowly passing King Cold, his children, and elect their guide, not long into his journey, as they would thankfully allow him to zip past without pursuing him out of curiosity. Though the act obviously sparked yet another heated tit-for-tat from Frieza and Cooler about the efficacy and efficiency of mass slaughter, and how it and proper troop deployment should be carried out, with the older brother having taken no shortage of opportunities to snidely remind Frieza of such basic lessons their father had offered over the years, or sometimes even openly criticizing his decisions as the current emperor, in clear insinuation that he could do better, which has gotten a rise out of this slightly younger Frieza than we're used to, each time without failure. By this point, painfully reminding King Cold why he had come to enjoy retirement, and more importantly, being an empty nester so much, while Alec is still busy looking for a good opportunity to slip away and rendezvous with his own pawns after he has gotten the password and found a way to slow down Frieza and his family. And so as they make their siege on the spire, the Namekian Grand Elder, King Cold, Frieza, and Cooler descend like three gods of death, as though they are an emperor, a king, a lord, and the universe's most powerful information broker, aside from Zuno that is. They have not come to negotiate nor talk, they simply want the open sesame to the Dragon Balls. As they land though, the largest Namekian any of them, aside from Alec, has seen thus far, reluctantly steps out while lazily stretching and cracking its strong elastic body in preparation to greet them. Slug stands at the entrance, his massive frame blocking the doorway completely, while he sizes them all up, his eyes lingering on Alec, the same tension as what came with recognition of Gas and Turles, as he makes very sure to loudly and clearly vocalize that it is not good to see his old heater partner, nor are he and his guests welcome here, powerful as they may be. So he is warning them all with the same ferocity and protectiveness that Gine drove him back with, to get off his planet now if they value their lives, or else they shall face the power of a Super Namekian. The use of this terminology actually seems to strike a bit of fear in the hearts of the Wicked Bloodline, as the history of the lineage has never gone well when they have pitted themselves against creatures that claim to be super, chaotic, or godly, the sight of which makes Lord Slug instantly consider assuming his giant form to further increase the efficacy of his bluff. However, in response to the spark of minor fear, and recognizing that as the father, he is responsible for first conquering his fears if he wants to see his children do the same, King Cold steps forward, his cape fluttering in the Namekian wind, as gambling on whether the green people have the potential to rival Saiyans, the prior Universal Emperor goes Lord Slug to show him, since he admits that the Dark Namek's reputation somewhat precedes him. Indeed, to the fellow ruler for the courtesy of stepping forward first to honor him, Lord Slug would happily oblige, rearing back his hefty verted fist for his power of darkness, using the mystic attack of the Namekians to achieve extraordinary torque and rotation that would shred the shoulder of any regular warrior, and likely even the average Namek, as the first devastating blow to King Cold's jaw would actually tilt the suppressed monarch's head, lifting him off the ground a bit and leaving him susceptible to a further combo of Slug's free hand, extending to grab the Wicked King bearing the dignity of a clan by his throat, hoisting him even higher into the air. Then, Slug attacks the evil invader with a series of further extended punches, and finally, chokeslams the king down into the spire's foundation, breaking off the edge of it as the stone cracks under the weight of the former emperor, sending he, Slug, and his progeny toppling away from Guru, precisely as the guardian to the Grand Elder should carry out his duties, followed by shooting eye lasers at King Cold, whom finally resists and tries to right himself. Slug's eyes glow a piercing purplish red. The twin ocular beams of Dark Ki then blast directly into the king's chest, pinning him into the crater they just made together, and generating a greater explosion and dust cloud to obscure the results of such a brutal opening salvo upon their impact with the ground far below, obviously meant to inflict a massive amount of damage. However, even so, with a switch of his now sullied cape to clear the dust and debris, it would be revealed that King Cold had weathered these blows as Greek, and even so, looks no worse for wear, other than his eventual need for dry cleaning, of course, groaning that he will now need to swap to that terrible looking orange one that so quickly fell out of vogue. Though even so, with a slight against him, he had of course taken off of both of Lord Slug's arms with a single spear-handed chop, causing the terrifying Dark Super Namekian great pain, as Cooler and Frieza revealed themselves to be unharmed as well, actually laughing brattily at the Namekian's agony, admittedly making King Cold happy his power to dominate and brutalize could elicit such joy and unity in its children. However, just as soon as this is said, Cooler politely critiques once again that his dear brother may want to stop using those limiter stages of his by this point, as he estimates their current foe to be well equipped to harm his first form. That is, if he didn't do the rightful Emperor the courtesy of blocking for him. Though in an equally polite tone, Frieza quips back that this is exactly why he has trustworthy underlings like his big brother. Besides, taking such dribble seriously would be an even worse slight on the dignity of their wicked bloodline than even say Cooler's usual excursions that end in his inevitable reminder of who his betters are, nearly preparing to finally fight each other, and forcing their father to mediate. The brothers and Cold alike are all equally shocked when Slug reveals his plan to eventually become a ploy of his own, uncovering his having not only regrown his limbs, but also suddenly decoupled his original huge size, which he takes advantage of to abruptly take hold of King Cold again, attempting to crush and throw him as far away as physically possible, having easily assessed during that short exchange that even with his return to training in the ancient Namekian ways since his homecoming after the defeat on Earth, he will not be able to destroy the king on his own. But if he plays his cards right, he might be able to injure or commit a tiny bit of regicide on his princes, at least before he is able to make it back, since by this point, his only goal is to buy time, and thus he makes good on Cooler's big brotherly warning when he next turns his giant sights on the two siblings and begins to terrorize them, smashing Frieza completely out of his hover chair, and pinning him in a crater of his own with a smack of a giant green palm, while also catching Cooler unawares after his sly dodge by stealing a trick scene used by Granola to bend his eye beams at extremely sharp angles, so that they never miss, and pursue their targets endlessly, growling petulantly to himself as he continues to avoid the Super Namekian's attacks. Cooler questions where in the blazes that fool Alec is, not believing that Weasel would actually try to betray the Empire, and more importantly, himself at this stage, especially while they are so close. But as a matter of fact, he indeed is, having narrowly slipped away from Slug's initial charge, despite the Namek having not tried very hard to miss him. Alec simply needs Slug to keep the Cold family busy for him, as he ventures inside Guru's house to interrogate him the way Frieza would initially before attempting to fight Nail, and falling for the ploy to buy time and cannon. However, much as he showed with Gas, the Grand Elder is tight-lipped, and unwilling to give away anything other than that he has already chosen the faction who he and his Eternal Dragon shall side with, and it is obviously not the group who just rolled up with intentions to torture the passport out of him, correctly deducing from this that a correspondent or translator of some kind must have been sent already. Alec prepares to make a break for it, but the moment he does run to the edge of the spire, he comes face to face with a giant Slug, who more than happily sees fit to bring him into the fun this time, by running he and Cooler into each other, suddenly going cross-eyed so his eye beams chase them simultaneously, eagerly declaring that the Heater could consider that his resignation, now forced to fight together, as Alec reveals the ploy of the Namekians to his reluctant continued employers. Cooler and the Heater reaffirm their own alliance, with Alec warning that he'll need to get a bit uncivilized for this endeavor, and to excuse any slight he might make, as he suddenly snaps off his belt of bones and fangs, unleashing his full power. While agreeing to work with him, Cooler employs his own eye beams to simultaneously clash with Slug's, and better yet, sever the arm pinning Frieza, whom wisely takes the opportunity to attempt taking on a stronger form, only for Slug to just as quickly regrow the arm, and pin him down even deeper in the ground, while kicking his massive severed limb at Alec, in Cooler's position to crush them, however using his unleashed power and own magic materialization to generate a deadly and savage-looking spear. Alec, even while savage, deftly uses it to rend the giant Namekian limb into ribbons of shredded Slug, before then throwing his hefty conjured tool through the giant Namek's torso with enough force to blow a massive hole through it, which Cooler matches with an even bigger one when he flies cleanly through the Namek's face and at the back of his head fast enough that the blood and viscera collected in the rush attack are violently flung off of Cooler to keep his bio armor pristine, before with a sharp turn, he uses the Death Blaster to blow what remains of Slug completely off of Frieza, bringing his younger brother just as Frieza completes the shift to his final form. Though just as he does, Slug once again shows off the insane longevity and thirst for conquest that belongs to the Nightmare Namekian, as Lord Slug once again heals from such severe injuries, blasting Cooler, Alec, and the recently freed Frieza back with his Darkness Blaster, before then forming a super guard with an energy shield to better withstand their next counterattacks, as Frieza brattily accuses Cooler of hypocritically holding back his full power as well, since neither of them wanted to dull their pride by taking a fight with an insect seriously. Thankfully, just as it seems they they will need to cross that line, their father finally makes his return from the vacuum of deep space just outside of Namek's orbit, apologizing to his boys for the wait, as he easily begins to pump holes through Slug and his shield, using a hail of death beams that Frieza and Cooler quickly join in on. The family united once again, all gunning down Slug endlessly, quickly depleting the energy he is focusing in his defenses and regenerative ability until it finally runs out, and their torture seems to become effective, leaving the dark Super Namekian barely clinging on to life. In the rather disgusting family crazy finger beam barrage, Elec had wisely taken the chance to power down and slip away again, hoping to make a bit of a head start on the Wicked Bloodline, while taking the opportunity to enjoy evilly revealing his and Kuru's scheme and ruining any plans that Snake Elec may have cooked up. Slug reveals to King Cold, Cooler, and Frieza that he has finally wasted enough of their time, and that killing him with the Namekian in the home that he is protecting would render the Dragon Balls useless. Not only that, but they have already sent a messenger out with the password to allow their adversaries to use them right under their noses, with this infuriating them enough that they take off back to their ships at full speed together. Back at their hiding spot, the boys and Nail waste little more of their precious time and commit to summoning the Eternal Dragon of Namek, looking on in awe and shock at how different and larger it is compared to either Shinron or Torumbo combined. Introducing Porunga in all his glory, Nail tells his allies to be hasty in making their 3 wishes, with the sheer amount of extra payout to their final goal shocking and stunning the Earth-raised heroes in a paralysis of choice, as they have far more friends to bring back to life than they do wishes, and they don't want to be unfair when bringing them back to life, even in such dire straits. Thankfully, to fix this issue, when King Kai informs those training on his planet of the play-by-play, King Piccolo ends his training with Devilman and the others to request speaking with son Goku through the Kaiyo, with the Demon King making a plea to be brought back first. That is originally interpreted as his own selfish evil flaring back up, but is actually revealed to be pragmatic thinking of a way to maximize their wishes. However, after making this request for the first revival, the king actually asked to be brought to Namek, invalidating the entire point of restoring his self-proclaimed overwhelming power. Still, he argues that he has grown far stronger training here than any of the others thanks to facing off with them under 10 times gravity, shattering his previous limits. At the same time, they learn from King Kai the current situation, and besides, that Frieza character and his ilk are attacking his former home, making it his fight more than any other, and he could guarantee that Kami would agree if he were here. Thus, as no one mounts a better argument for how to use the second wish, the young Z fighters on Namek follow the king's orders, as they are lacking in firepower against their opponents, and a suitable game plan of their own. Raditz, Granola, and Goku agree to ask Nail to bring King Piccolo after his revival to the planet Namek, though in their haste, they realize too late that they didn't specify where on the planet to bring him. With their experience with the monkey's paw affected Torumbo's power of wishes, making such a rookie mistake all the more stinging and embarrassing. Even so, they prepare to make use of the third wish, but just as they do, they have the startling realization that their window has closed, as Vegeta and Turles' nap has ended upon sensing the approaching power wish of the Lords of the Empire, and the discussion between the younger Heater siblings too has come to an end, with both parties now glaring and bearing down upon the boys and Nail menacingly, with intentions to punish them for stealing the wishes right under their noses. Frantically to keep the peace, Goku reveals that there is a third wish left, but any time to make use of it is quickly eaten up by an argument that erupts about whether to wish for an immortal Turles or Elec. Even the ideal of healing Bardock and Muzi is thought of far too late, while Raditz even subtly suggests summoning his mother, with all this chaos keeping Nail from actually stating what he wants from Porunga, who becomes quite impatient. Meanwhile, King Piccolo, newly revived and standing on his ancestral home while having realized he doesn't know where he is, but that he can clearly see the giant dragon in the distance, causes the Demon King to take off to meet up with his allies. On his way, passing near Guru's spire, and taking very quick notice of the dying form of Lord Slug on the battlefield he'd made not far from it. Thus, the self-proclaimed Namekian king decides to meet with the Dark Namekian Lord. Landing softly, as he looks down at the broken giant, King Piccolo regards it as pathetic to see a nightmare of the stars like Slug reduced to garden waste like this, though still willing to bark back, even while coughing up purple blood and feeling the light in his eyes flickering out. Slug states that he doesn't want to hear this from a runt who ran to a backwater planet when home got a little hot, grunting that the young Namek, at least compared to how old he was, had gotten annoyingly arrogant playing dress up as some fairy tale villain. Though feeling his key now, Slug supposed that was fair considering he may well be the strongest Namekian in history, including himself, which he admits begrudgingly, and with overemphasis on how tough a hurdle he was to surpass. Even so, the fallen Dark Lord boasts that he bought the time he needed for Goku and the others to make their wishes, which the king actually deigns to show appreciation for. But feeling what they are up against closer, Piccolo recognizes that even wishes and a Demon King may not actually be enough, though in response, Slug reaches out a trembling charred hand, admitting that his life force and regenerative reserves are depleted, but that his hatred, darkness, and ki are still burning bright, and if they combined their power, it would surely grant Piccolo a boost similar to what he could achieve had he and Kami never separated. At first, King Piccolo is shocked by the offer, and then reluctant and suspicious, expecting some ploy from Slug to maybe take over as the dominant personality of the merger. But Slug earnestly admits to wanting nothing more than to watch their enemies' heads roll in the Namekian dirt, confirming that he agrees to allow Piccolo the dominant consciousness, as long as he attains victory, since everyone knows a lord is subordinate to a king. Thus, Lord Slug's terrifying conquest will end today, while the Dark Demon King Piccolo's will truly begin. And with that, and in order to lay his hand upon Lord Slug's chest, the merger begins, as King Piccolo agrees to make the Wicked Bloodline scream for their mistake of not simply invading a home, or killing a Namekian, but making something wholly different, as the Dark Key of Slug is absorbed. A violent swirling vortex of dark green and purple energy erupts from near the spire, as Guru senses the fading of his sibling. Slug's body begins to dissolve into pure jagged light, flowing into King Piccolo, as the Demon King's muscles then expand in bulk, his aura turning a deep bruised violet. The ground beneath them liquefies and shatters from the sheer pressure of the combined Dark Super Namekian and Demon King energies, as King Piccolo, exhilarated by the boon, suddenly begins to shout out boisterously that he feels amazing, and is sure that he can outdo this, to which the voice of Slug, now still existing in his head, makes fun of him, as the other Namekian reveals that he agreed to let him be dominant, not to be quiet forever, causing Lord Piccolo to take off once again towards the battlefield at tenfold speeds. Meanwhile, back with those at the base of Porunga, arguing and fighting over what wish to make last, another startling update is made, as now that his life is no longer in danger should Slug pass away from his injuries, Guru has the option to simply hold on and await how the battles to come will play out. But whether to be overtly rude, or to foil the plots of all the villains who weren't here in the original story, Guru decides to up and stop living suddenly, severing any remaining connection to Slug/Piccolo and the mortal coil itself, causing Porunga to vanish before a third wish can even be made, just as Elec, and not long after him, Frieza, Cooler, and King Cold arrive finally. The 7 Dragon Balls turn to stone and crash down to the valley uselessly. The panic and discord this shocking turn of events elicits from everyone in the mutinous band of despots, who have bested the most super elite soldiers in the universe. Would almost be comical if it were not so infuriating, since before they can take notice of the much grander threat now in their midst, they must mourn the death of their own petty dreams. And so even the newly discovered fact that a total of 3 wishes were up for grabs is beyond irritating to learn this late into the game. This discovery, and only meager bit of fear from those who wronged them, makes the current Galactic Emperor begin petulantly throwing a terrifying tantrum at the dragon being gone, while Cooler, despite also having lost out on any benefit from a wish, laughs at Frieza's misfortune and blames this outcome on the younger brother not following his orders, despite his having openly admitted to by this point working against their collective efforts at multiple stages, simply to spite Frieza and steal the wishes all for himself, making him equally as responsible for this blunder, which finally, the dramatic irony of is not lost on King Cold, who looks from the Grey Stones to the terrified Earth heroes and space-traveling warriors assembled, all having in some way forced their lineage to taste defeat for only the second time in its history, recognizing that there is no immortality, no wishes, just a planet full of gnats that have wasted a great deal of time and effort. For a moment, seeing the flamboyant monarch mirror his youngest child and beginning to seethe with an open planet-shaking hatred, though still attempting to mask it with an indifferent, polite facade like his eldest. However, after a short beat, the king and his kin begin to all generally laugh good-naturedly, as if they had just now been let in on a long-running inside joke that has awoken a grand deal of sudden genuine unity in the family, as they each realize this means they will just need to settle the score by slaughtering everyone gathered here, and then they can go to this planet Earth. If it really does have Dragon Balls, then great, but either way, the miserable little mudball sounds like a perfect destination to direct their campaign of imperial punishment. As if ready to fully commit to instilling this state of oppression, Frieza and Cooler suddenly step before their father, as though he is not the current head of the empire, he is of their tenacious clan, and his terrifying strength must be projected now more than ever as the mightiest of monarchs, lest the clan's reputation fall even further, meaning it would be rather untoward to allow him to set even a foot on a battlefield that isn't already drenched in the blood of the enemy. However, at this insinuation that he still recognizes his father as superior to himself in battle power, Cooler still seems exceedingly smug, as if he's at this point still hiding something, which unnerves Frieza, but there's little time to think of that now, as the two brothers begin firing ki blasts from their palms at the various gathered species. Heaters, Saiyans, and Israelians alike forced into a mad scramble for life, the evil siblings attempting to blast them all finally out of the universal gene pool with devastating attacks, even though it is clear that neither are really putting that much force into the finicky shots, which even though half-hearted, are capable of deleting large islands and continents alike off of Namek, as if they were entries in a spreadsheet. In the scramble, the more seasoned fighters can keenly avoid these shots, allowing Frieza and Cooler to accomplish their true goal of gauging what exactly killed their top men, while keeping their distance, allowing them to witness the Saiyans and Cerulean avoiding their attacks with a mixture of raw speed and agility, along with practiced technique and defensive maneuvers. While for the Heaters, Elec and Gaz are able to react and dodge as well, with the oldest Heater still snarkily making jokes, excuses, resources and offers to sell the Imperial family on a cheapling deal of his services as an apology, or rather, another ploy at conning them. Meanwhile, Oil and Maki are far less accustomed to this extremely high level of battle, and so very quickly require protection, which it falls to Gas as the family muscle and his shields to render, while Alec is busy taking care of himself. As the dust settles from this opening salvo, and it becomes clear these upstarts and traitors who have decimated their army, shamed their empire and bloodline, and worst of all, ruined their plans and scheme for immortality, are indeed worthy of their full and undivided murderous attention. Frieza and Cooler are feeling on one accord now that simply blowing up Namek and leaving immediately after the fireworks would be too improper a response to such a challenge. The duo of reptilian overlords then politely institute a set of rules for engagement in what they call a game of death, but in reality, it's just a fight for their lives, since the younger brother won't get the pleasure of exploiting their fear with his transformations, and the elder won't enjoy a chance to prove himself once again better than his brother. So to get some enjoyment out of this, only Frieza and Cooler will engage them in combat, as they plan to make a contest out of it to see who can kill the most of their assorted enemies while using the smallest percentage of their true power, making it more a duel between one another than anything else. Cooler, of course, still has ulterior motives for the death game, as little does his brother know, but Cooler still has something up his sleeves that has been unnerving his incompetent baby brother, which makes him more than happy to play around for now, showing Frieza how a proper emperor should conduct himself, having finally begun to feel as if he is fully caught onto the machinations of the ancestral spirit that reached out to him. While this smugness isn't lost on Frieza, his brother's compliance is a rare treat, increasing the bratty emperor's desire to subjugate him. For the first and only time in their lives, they can actually fight alongside each other with a shared goal, against scum they deem just as loathsome as their own sibling. Thus, to avoid damaging the dignity of the Wicked Bloodline by proverbially hunting rabbits with cannons, they agree that tying their hands behind their backs is the best way to properly vent their frustrations. Meanwhile, they request that their father remain a spectator, partially out of recognition for the old monarch as their technical strongest fighter, but also to keep their daddy from ending their sadistic fun too quickly, since they intend to make an example out of these fools for the next batch of recruits, and any amongst the rebels ready to give up this foolishness and pledge undying loyalty to the soon-to-be undying conquerors. Agreeing to his passive portion of this genocidal trinity, and finding a comfy spot to watch the carnage, King Cold danced to grant the rebels his genuine praise and thanks. Despite their treacherous robbing of his immortality, he voices his belief that the obstacles, puzzles, and challenges provided by the assorted group of lesser species are exactly what his sons needed to grow even wiser as military leaders, and thus stronger, as impossible as that once seemed for their ilk, since he had always prided himself on preparing his children with all the skills they needed to thrive in life. However, cooperation was always a difficult one, as even the king himself has always struggled with it. And so as Cooler and Frieza face off with all those gathered to take on their imposing threat of a deadly good time, they allow their prey only the illusion of choice in what comes next, as Turles, Vegeta, Goku, Raditz, Granola, Kid Nail, Oil, Maki, Gas, and Alec are now plunged into more than enough fear to activate a fight or flight response. But realizing escape and hiding are not great options at this point, the experienced fighters amongst the group of cornered Dragon Ball hunters prepare for battle, while the less fighting savvy amongst them like Oil and Maki try to get out of dodge, with their battle powers having always been better suited for acting as entourage and the occasional support rather than main bodyguards like Gas is. While Nail initially and valiantly wants to fight alongside his friends like a proper warrior Namek, he quickly recognizes two things. First, that he is too massively outclassed, even with a potential boosted boom, and second, that extra ki and combat power may not be the something extra the Grand Elder was talking about. Alec, despite having a notable suppressed power level, however, wants to dip out of the direct fight along with Oil and Maki, but Gas strangely voices a differing opinion that they should actually bet their odds on their allies wholeheartedly, citing this as the best chance they will ever get at the ambitions of overthrowing the Wicked Bloodline, which Alec has always stated were for the good and prosperity of their family, seeing him questioning now just how strong his big brother had gotten behind his security guard's back, and for what purpose he plans to employ that power if not for this. At the same time, given that they are already in dire straits with no hopes of escape, that they would need to procure a new unfamiliar ship and then operate it successfully, while pursued by the most devastatingly powerful attackers possible, and that worst of all, it would mean running away from the biggest and most important battle in the universe, Turles, Goku, and the others choose to play the death game, essentially lining up against their preferred choice of executioner, while betting on their numbers advantage, and the cavalry on the way, with Bardock and Muesli due to finish healing any minute now, and apparently a much stronger King Piccolo en route to try to maximize their incredibly slim odds of survival. Having heard Cooler's snide remark about incompetent younger siblings, Turles, Raditz, and Granola stand up to him, as each of them has their own ideal about how so-called competent big brothers are meant to behave. And on the other hand, having heard nothing all their lives but how much they should fear the current Galactic Emperor, Goku, Vegeta, and Gas, defying the orders of a seemingly still indecisive Alec, stand against Frieza without fear of the imminent doom such a fate entails. Granola is the technical middle sibling of their mishmash family of Earthlings, Saiyans, and Ceruleans on Earth, has often gotten the experience as both Goku's older brother and Raditz's slightly younger brother, so that he knows full well a much-needed humbling is the only cure to a smug elder sibling. While Raditz, having grown to understand how a big brother should set an example, is able to suppress his cowardice and mildly challenge Cooler's outlook, stating that if little brothers are weak or incompetent, it's obvious because their older brother is a bad role model, and ultimately, Turles just doesn't like cocky older brothers, and simply enjoys trampling them, his own included. However, along with this, he cites a sneaking suspicion that Cooler is hiding the fact that he is indeed stronger than his little brother, making him the more alluring battle for the dark-skinned Saiyan, all of which assures Cooler he too will thoroughly enjoy this. While Goku would have the same banter and engagement with Frieza as in canon for the most part, just with the difference of Frieza actually being able to enjoy looking down on Goku for once in a timeline, with the same going for Vegeta, with this more bratty and immature version of Frieza, teasing and mocking all the harder. While Gas will point out to Frieza that since he was born, he has done nothing but prepare himself to fulfill Elec and the Heater family's ambition to kill the Emperor, which Frieza is more than happy to reveal he was always aware of, haughtily stating that he only let Elec and the Heater scurry around behind his back for the benefit of his own army, and that they only got the chance to bear their thanks when they found a literal wish to change the course of fate. An initial rush from these 6 fighters against the Sons of Code is impressive, especially considering the boons and power they have achieved and amassed. Seeing clever tricks and powerful techniques employed, like a maneuver from Goku of hiding under the water at one point, and taking advantage of Frieza's lack of ki sense to distract him with decoy ki blasts that are followed up by a surprise demon monkey dropkick, which clearly rattles and surprises the pint-sized terrifying conqueror, allowing Prince Vegeta to unload the greatest and most annoying volley of ki blasts he has ever attempted on the Imperial Tormentor who took him from his father and Planet Vegeta before destroying it. And when Frieza finally finds a way out of the copious amounts of light, dust, and debris kicked up due to this, he is easily surprised again and restrained in a tightly clutching armbar by Gas, who then uses his strength to slam them down onto a pre-laid platform of spikes that Frieza's body's remarkable durable enough to smash through, as if they didn't exist. Seeing he and the Heater crash down through the surface of Namek hard enough to create new valleys and overflow previously dry canyons, thanks to Gas immediately throwing everything he has at Frieza by transforming into his unleashed form. However, even this admirable cooperation between rivals that would seem uncanny compared to their canon counterparts is still a bit overwhelmed as they are, as Gas is easily blown back to reveal Frieza bragging to Cooler that it only took about 5% of his power to endure that easily avoided combined assault without issue. The monstrous nature of this death game now becoming strictly apparent, as both monkey-tailed fighters had thrown everything they had at the Emperor, including their own master of the spirit of the Saiyans, while Gas had trusted in the fact that Frieza is such a big target to sober him up while in his berserk state, though now it is the fact that he once again feels fear while at his full power that does the job for him, just as Frieza begins to take his own terrifying turn. On the other side of the battlefield, another massive clash is set off as Turles, Raditz, and Granola engage Cooler. We see Granola conjure multiform clones to further overwhelm and study the elder scion of the Wicked Bloodline for vital points, having each weaker version of himself abuse the enemy's blind spots and every aspect of his training to hold out. While Granola's clones create a chaotic, multi-directional distraction, Raditz proves himself to be a top-class warrior and yapper, thinking of the only lie that could throw off his opponent. The wild-haired Saiyan youth convinces Cooler to look behind him at the army of great apes he's called to face him, subsequently cheap-shotting the proudest in the universe with a dynamite kick. Though as Cooler withstands these techniques without issue, Raditz and Granola appear too paralyzed by their initial attempts going nowhere to try anything else. So it is Turles who takes up the charge, locking hands with Cooler in a fierce one-on-one test of might. Glaring straight into the tyrant's burning red eyes, Turles questions how utterly stupid Cooler has to be to believe a Saiyan would ever genuinely bow his head to him, if they wouldn't even do it for Frieza, with Cooler answering back that the lowly upstart is barely worth Frieza's first form, though he is caught off guard when Turles knows that he was merely waiting for a fun setup, activating his own spirit of the Saiyans alongside a point-blank Gallic Blazer to disprove Cooler's notion. The dark-skinned Saiyan triggers a surge of battle power greater than an Uzaru transformation, blasting the would-be Emperor back. At that exact moment, the true nature of Granola and Raditz's hesitance is revealed. In reality, the young Cerulean had merely been straining his eyes to locate a vital weak point on Cooler's sleep frame, a task made harder than ever against a foe radiating such a blinding amount of ki. Meanwhile, Raditz was focusing on controlling his own power finely enough to create a fake move, without horribly draining his own ki reserves in the process. As over the last 6 months, the wild-haired eldest son had used his time to train under Bardock, a far greater master of the skill Nappa once taught him, achieving true mastery over the Great Ape form, and creating artificial moons and sources of blood waves. The father-son duo had even endeared to teach Goku how to control his transformation, and to aim it at the right enemies, so searching for the perfect zenith to place his orb, so that all Saiyans of the battlefield can gain the tenfold increase of their attacks. Raditz was only waiting patiently for the right moment to achieve it, exactly when his mint-haired sniper rival finally finds a critical area, landing a shot on Cooler's shin to break his posture, and thus allowing Turles' blast to consume him. At the precise second, Raditz orders his power ball to burst open and mix, telling everyone to take a good hard look at the new moon. The Earth Race fighter son Gojo calls this the proper way to nuke a troublesome boss fight, as a startling transformation overtakes the members of the Saiyan warrior race. Suddenly seeing the threats against them maximized, just as Cooler prepares to countermeasure, he is forced back-to-back with Frieza. A raging blast of fur, fists, giant rocks, and ki fired uncouthly from the mouth, pressuring them both intensely. with each sign of the Wicked Bloodline recognizing they are in fact facing a duo of Saiyans with their tails alongside a powerful support fighter. They now have to worry about a total of 4 Great Apes on the battlefield, leading to a sharp increase in the difficulty of their death game and playtime. Seeing this could generally be more dangerous than the giant Namek from earlier, Frieza and Cooler easily admit this is a much tougher challenge than they expected, thus requiring an increased exertion of over 20% of their power to avoid being squashed. Worse than that, they are actually forced to coordinate their countermeasures and work together to deal with all 4 feral beasts, the Heater and the Cerulean. Identifying it as too difficult to attempt both taking out the artificial moon or disabling their tails alone, while also adhering to their self-imposed game and its rules. They agree on a gentleman's allowance to both showcase about 1/3 of their full powers, before they are further swarmed under a hail of blast and monkey punches. Thus, the evil brotherly duo team up to tie the Saiyans' tails together, and proceed to fly right through the fake moon, so the beast will instinctively give chase. This chaotic motion creates an impromptu Great Ape King that completely disrupts and discombobulates the Saiyans. Their strength is rapidly sapped due to the immense pressure and damage they are inflicting on each other's tangled tails, throwing off their coordination entirely, as it makes it far more difficult to control the Uzaru state. Thus, they instantly become massive and erratic liabilities in this form, rather than weapons of mass destruction, accidentally clipping granola and glass from their stray, errant attacks as a bonus. Ultimately, the brilliance of this strategy is that it leaves no other choice. The Saiyans must sacrifice their tails to free themselves, or attempt to endure fatal shots from a brother's death beam. Watching from the sidelines, King Cold affectionately praises his sons for their cunning and ruthlessness, giving them a proud round of applause, as this forces a reluctant, painful agreement from Turles, Vegeta, Raditz, and a feral Kakarot to tear off each other's tails, abruptly ending their transformations, and allowing them to barely avoid the Imperial attack for the cost of enduring such a brutal humiliation. Of course, this doesn't mean they get away completely unscathed on either front of this lethal game, now that Cooler and Frieza can fight separately again. But as the ringleader of the little monkey circus, Raditz is singled out for special punishment. Therefore, a pair of death beams still gores the poor Saiyan Brainiac, leaving him with a gaping, fatal wound alongside profoundly injured Saiyan pride. Now with even cheat codes being fully nullified, and starting to see the middling results towards their play in the death game, and worse, injuries beginning to stack up for the heroes of the planet Namek, Nail attempts a sneak attack of his own, hoping that if he can catch the men who butchered his people off guard, with all the power he can amass, it will fell them. But his mystic flash from Frieza and Cooler's blind spot is still ineffective, merely bouncing off of them and gaining their attention, leading Nail to down the power the Grand Elder gifted him, as he is nearly decimated by a response blast from Frieza and Cooler that Raditz, fighting through his pain and cowardice, can just barely help the young Namek to avoid, at the cost of taking the hit himself, his remaining life force and energy, with the heroic youth finally beginning to fade out fast, as he requires immediate medical attention. Though in response to this need, not a desire for a way to contribute to the fight, Nail finally discovers his newly gifted healing ability from Guru, which is usually only meant to manifest in members of the Dragon Clan, a special case having been made for him against such insurmountable odds. As a yellow-orange glow envelops Raditz, now recognizing the usefulness of the something extra the creator Porunga was talking about, Nail can lay his hands on him and completely heal his critically wounded ally, as the light fades off of Raditz, revealing fully healed flesh underneath his previously pierced armor. As the eldest son of Bardock pops back up, Nail and Raditz, feeling stronger than he did when he went down, both share twin cunning grins. I just agreed the young warrior Namek should stay out of sight, but not exactly out of the battle, as the spiky-haired video game junkie warrior pronounces that he's now their white mage, before re-entering the battle with renewed vigor, the element of surprise, and a freshly earned Zenkai boost, as Nail endeavors to perform his healing on the others who are down each at least once, likely already trying to push aside hesitance towards healing the evil, like Dende had, as his warrior's mindset and training make him deadly aware of the situation they are in, but also a lot more capable of using the Namekian healing gift than Dende as an untrained fighter was in canon. Thankfully, to buy time for this recovery, Elect finally decides to step in around this point, choosing to genuinely work with Turles and the others by taking a chance at a cheap shot to try and take out Cooler, whom he as a proper informant and broker would snitch on, now that he has placed his bets, confirming the older brother has reportedly been hiding something for a while that very well could be another form. Upon also becoming a target though, Elec employs all his knowledge and assorted dirty tricks and tactics to join the assault against Cooler, fully shedding his former positions as both the secretly weakest and secretly strongest Heater when he decides to get uncivilized again and enter his own unleashed state, attempting to suppress it naturally through hard work and grit, as Gas has been doing with the hopes of possibly mastering his own full berserk strength, with Elec giving strict orders for his younger sibling to attempt to do the same and keep his promise to become the strongest in the universe and ultimate muscle protector of the Heaters, though this mostly serves to show that Gas is incapable of pulling off such a feat at this point. At the same time, King Piccolo finally arrives on the battlefield after his union with Lord Slug, and without hesitation after reuniting with the Z-Fighters and thanking them for resurrecting him, he joins the fight against Frieza, now a fully realized Dark Super Namekian in his own right. The self-proclaimed Demon King and former Scourge of the Earth now stands as the unequivocal strongest fighter on the side of the heroes. And so, Piccolo Daimao greets Frieza, both as a fellow tyrannical ruler and one of the very Namekians he has so gleefully trampled on. Subsequently, his explosive darkness demon rush is empowered by synchronization with Slug, his original Demon Clan training, and a fierce desire to avenge each and every Namekian, allowing King Piccolo to begin pummeling and crushing Frieza more effectively than any attacks of the Wicked Bloodline thus far have. Eventually, these additional forces don't work to win the day either, with Goku, Vegeta, and Gas struggling to back King Piccolo against Frieza with a raging combo, while Turles, Granola, and Raditz do the same with Elec against Cooler, using a more rebellious and brutal bombardment of attacks. But even so, just another agreement to increase in strength to utilizing 50% of their power is all it takes for Frieza and Cooler to continue proving themselves the strongest warriors in the universe, as they begin to turn the tables on King Piccolo, Elec, and their allies. And so, of course, desiring another sorely needed power boost of their own, Vegeta and Turles turn to desperately injuring each other, in certainty that Nail will heal them. However, unable to stifle his feelings, he still refused initially as Dende would in canon, sensing their evil deeds towards the Namekians, and likeness to Frieza that prevented them from earning Guru's boost, with Nail not reconsidering until it's nearly too late to save the two dastardly Saiyan invaders, as the other fighters continue to get injured from their absence in the battle, seeing Nail for his righteousness need to begin a second round of healing on his allies, just as he finishes tending to King Piccolo's injuries, and recognizes the spirit of Lord Slug survives within him, with his encouragement to heal the Saiyans being what pushes them over the edge. On the upside, however, is the fact that Nail is again a trained warrior, and more savvy at battle than Dende, meaning he's a lot harder to spot and actually find while he works to heal their enemies, just as Frieza and Cooler are preoccupied. But eventually, their loving father becomes wise to the fact that someone is resurrecting their adversaries, despite the increased number of them from canon making that feat, along with this task of snuffing out the rebellion far more tedious than necessary, and seeing the old monarch keep an eye out for what is happening between his children defeating their enemies and their reappearing. Once Turles and Vegeta come back up fully healed, and subsequently kick Nail in thanks for nearly letting them die, the final stage of the cruel death game begins, as it instantly becomes clear that Turles has achieved some kind of limit-breaking power from this latest Zenkai boost, as he is able to suddenly output even greater energy than Cooler and Frieza using only half their strength. Feeling much more confident now, Turles begins claiming himself to be a Super Saiyan, as he pushes his spirit of the Saiyans beyond its normal means, allowing the evil and mighty villainous influence from the Tree of Might he ate from for so long to merge with the state, as it results in Turles achieving what we would know as the evil Saiyan form from Super Dragon Ball Heroes, here in this continuity for the first time. And with the boost from this new form and his power granting him a legendary existence of his own, Turles is able to generate a super kill driver that consumes and seemingly kills Cooler, even as he allows his body to bulk up with 100% of his power. Still, his death flash is simply consumed and turned into further fuel for Turles' key attack to detonate with, as he gloats that he told that slimy lizard that's what happens to cocky big brothers, before sinisterly turning his ire on Frieza and overpowering him as well, while the younger Wicked Bloodline brother desperately tries to goad the Saiyan into allowing him to power up to his own 100% full power. In contrast, for a moment, King Cold is the one paralyzed by fear, now that the terrifying legend has seemingly been realized, only thinking now to question if the evil Saiyan form is really what he thinks it is, as he enters the fray with Frieza, but fails to fight as well as he should due to his hesitation, being bad at bat disrespectful, as Frieza is demeaned by having his head crushed and spun around. But just as the tables turn too far in Turles' favor and justify his getting so cocky, King Cold and Frieza realize that Cooler is not only alive, but that all this time he was simply transforming and has now assumed his fifth or final form, whatever you may call it. With his power now finally revealed to his father and brother, several things become clear. Cooler is not only now the strongest member of the Wicked Bloodline, but also the sole strongest in the universe, and the rightful heir to the Empire. With this declaration enraging Frieza, as his older brother presumptuously orders him to finish powering up to his own max, so that they can end this little charade. Now acting perfectly together, Cooler leads King Cold and Frieza, just like the mysterious entity he met in the vision said he would, allowing them to decimate their strongest foes and re-establish the order of their empire and honor their clan, thus seeking to end things by breaking their opponent's spirits. Final Turles, Elec, and King Piccolo all wind up with a dynasty of terrifying conquerors' tails around their throats, as they are hanged and hoisted high while Cooler, Frieza, and Cold ruthlessly drive devastating blows into their target spines that land with enough force to be heard and felt around the planet, even after it is long clear neither the evil Saiyan, Dark Super Namekian, or Cunning Unleashed Heater can fight or pose a threat any further, leaving Goku, Raditz, Granola, Vegeta, and Gas as the ones completely gripped by fear. Meanwhile, in the abandoned Frieza Force ship, the timers for the medical machines begin to go off, alerting the occupants inside that they are finally fully healed and can stop spectating the battle through their key sense alone. Thus together, Bardock and Muesli burst from the medicine-filled tanks inside of Frieza's ship, collect the power pole, fly out hard enough to completely total the spacecraft, and begin to race to the battlefield, just in time to see at least their children and even Gas and Vegeta know word for where, at least thanks to Nail's healing. However, as would occur in canon to the Prince of All Saiyans upon his revised declaration that the real Super Saiyan had just now arrived, Turles meets meets his end as Cooler fires a death beam that rips through his chest, permanently severing their short-lived partnership, in what is clearly meant to be an intimidating execution to break the hero's spirits. But the mighty Turles does not go down as a mission, but with his pride intact, as even to the bitter end, he is a Saiyan warrior brought low as much by his own decisions to push his evil Saiyan power to the limit of what it can do, as he was by the Purple Tyrants. And in his final moments, that makes all the difference in allowing the dark-skinned Saiyan's death on Namek to be a bit more gratifying than Vegeta's in canon, though this is completely lost on the Wicked Bloodline, who now feel confident and even more cohesive as a family, despite recent revelations and rivalries not all being dealt with completely. The point is, they are now truly united, that they have already defeated the legend that once struck fear in their entire bloodline. While at the same time, for his treason in hand in bringing about all this rebellion, Alec nearly shares the same fate as Turles, if not for Gas, as despite all his growing pushback to his brother's selfishness, it is undeniable that he still cares deeply about him in his role as a bodyguard, and thus the youngest Heater prodigy jumps in front of the death beam meant for Alec, protecting his big brother for a final time before passing on to the other world as well. Instead of engaging the enemy immediately as they arrive, however, Muesli first checks on Granola, Raditz, Goku, and King Piccolo, simultaneously keeping an eye on Alec and noticing that he seems a bit too happy to have survived this at the cost of his family's lives, noting once more to herself how this should have been a clear warning of how much he would value his non-familiar allies. Though a part of her is already aware that the Weasley Basil will not have given up his ambitions just yet, and that he will need to be stopped permanently when the time comes. Even though their debts and dealings are now all seemingly settled up, she still has a score with a Heater boss she has waited a long time to settle, and she doesn't intend to miss her opportunity. While Bardock actually spares a moment to pay his respects to both Gas and Turles by burying them both, and admitting that he'd always held a deep respect for them, not just as warriors, but as the rivals who changed the entire course of his life for the better, simply by pushing him to his limits, whether they meant to or not, feeling even more strongly than Goku would have in canon that they deserved this last rites, since had circumstances been mildly different, he could have been in their shoes all this time, with this final act of mercy and humanity being all they will allow henceforth, since the Cerulean Mother and Saiyan Father at long last face off against the Galactic Tyrants, as from here, the final stage of the Namek and Wicked Bloodline saga is about to commence.